Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we cordially invite the Senate of Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Diponegoro, to enter the room. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we cordially invite you to be seated at the respective seats. Thank you. Before we start the event today, we would like to express our sincere gratitude to the Excellency Rektor of Universitas Diponegoro, Profesor Dr. Yos Johan Utama, SHM Hum, Vice Rectors of Universitas Diponegoro,
Respectable the Dean of Faculty of Economics and Business Universitas Diponegoro, Professor Dr. Suharnomo SAMSI,
Honorable Professor Timber Hacker from Saxion University of Applied Sciences, the Netherlands, the Vice Dean of Faculty of Economics and Business Universitas Diponegoro, the Chairman and members of Senat, Faculty of Economics and Business Universitas Diponegoro, all lecturers, alumni, and staff of Faculty of Economics and Business Universitas Diponegoro, respected audience, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, let's praise our God, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, the most gracious, the most merciful, the creator and sustainer of the universe, so we can all attend and participate in this online and offline event without any obstacles.
Today, March the 15th, 2021, we proudly present Rapat Senat Terbuka dan Orasi Ilmiah with the theme of Business Model and Business Model Innovation in relation to digitization, sustainability, and COVID-19.
As the first agenda for the day's event, let's stand together to sing National Anthem Indonesia Raya and Mars Universitas Diponegoro. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please stand up. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, please sit down. Next, there will be an opening remark by the Chairman of Senate of Faculty of Economics and Business Universitas Diponegoro to Professor Anis Kariri, SA, Akuntan MCom PhD. Time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. By reciting Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, the Faculty Senate Assembly and scientific oration by Professor Timber Hacker for the 61st anniversary of the Faculty of Economic and Business, University of Negoro, officially open.
Thus, the opening remark by the Senate of Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Diponegoro. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, move to the following agenda, that is speeches. The first is welcoming speech from the Dean of Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Diponegoro, to Professor Dr. Suharnomo, SAMSI. The time is yours.
Yang kami hormati Bapak Rektor Universitas Diponegoro dan segenap Wakil Rektor, pimpinan lembaga di Universitas Diponegoro, rekan-rekan dekan dan dosen di lingkungan Universitas Diponegoro, Ketua, Sekretaris, dan anggota Senat Fakultas Ekonomika dan Bisnis Universitas Diponegoro, para guru besar Fakultas Ekonomika dan Bisnis Universitas Diponegoro. Kita dapat kabar bahwa Prof. Miasto kemarin sore masuk ICU di RSND, oleh karena itu marilah kita berdoa bersama dengan membaca Al-Fatihah. Terima kasih, semoga Pak Prof. Miasto, Ibu, Mbak Asti, dan Bapak Ibu dosen yang barangkali hari ini dan juga tendik yang hari ini sedang sakit, kita doakan semoga segera sembuh kembali. Wakil Dekan Pak Warsito, Pak Firman juga sedang isolasi mandiri saya rasa, tapi ini sudah insya Allah sudah bagus. Para Ketua Departemen, Ketua Program Studi di lingkungan FEB Universitas Diponegoro, para kolega dosen, tenaga kependidikan, mahasiswa, alumni Universitas Diponegoro, pimpinan lembaga kemahasiswaan, BEM, dan Senat Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis, terima kasih hadirnya. Ibu Dharma Wanita Persatuan, Mitra Bank yang hadir di kesempatan ini dari PTN, dari Mandiri, dari BNI, dari BSI, and our keynote speakers, Dr. Insinyur Timber Hacker, a professor of business model at Saxion University of Applied Science, the Netherlands, one of the best partner for us in double degree program. We are very happy to have you, sir, and I think the topic you will deliver for us, business model innovation and sustainability, is very great and very, very interesting. Segenap tamu undangan, rekan sejawat, sahabat, keluarga yang berbahagia, baik luring maupun daring. Hadirin yang berbahagia, marilah kita panjatkan puji syukur pada Allah SWT atas karunia yang tak terhingga sehingga kita bisa bertemu dalam mengikuti sidang Senat Terbuka FEB Universitas Diponegoro dengan agenda perayaan tasyakuran Dies FEB Undip ke-61. Perkenankan saya mengucapkan terima kasih atas kesediaan Bapak, Ibu, dan Saudara semua untuk hadir, bergabung, dan memberikan doa terbaik bagi FEB Undip, baik yang hadir secara luring maupun daring. Hadirin yang kami muliakan, peringatan kali ini dilaksanakan dalam suasana perubahan yang sangat dramatis, yaitu adanya revolusi industri 4.0. Revolusi yang telah banyak membawa dampak yang luar biasa di semua bidang kehidupan, di mana arah baru ekonomi menuju online, kebutuhan besar akan digital talent, dan makin pentingnya kecakapan sosial. Revolusi industri ini juga mensyaratkan kompetensi baru, yaitu kemampuan literasi membaca data, literasi teknologi, literasi manusia, dan keseimbangan mental antara teknologi dan kesehatan rohani. Bapak Ibu yang kami hormati, tasyakuran Dies Fakultas Ekonomika dan Bisnis ke-61 ini juga ditandai dengan masih merebaknya wabah pandemi COVID-19, melemahnya ekonomi global, dan resesi yang menimpa banyak bangsa termasuk Indonesia, dan berdampak besar bagi pembelajaran di perguruan tinggi. Bapak Ibu yang kami hormati, puji syukur Alhamdulillah. Kinerja Fakultas Ekonomika dan Bisnis di tahun 2021 ini tidaklah mengecewakan. Dalam subjek Business and Management, Undip di HS World University Ranking by subject, kita berada di posisi 501 di level dunia dan nomor 4 di Indonesia setelah UGM, ITB, dan UNER. Dan tepuk tangan untuk kita semua. Saya rasa di Undip juga satu-satunya yang by subject Ekonomika dan Bisnis masuk di ranking World Class University. Bapak Ibu, dalam perayaan Tasyakuran Des Natalis ke-61 ini, izinkan saya untuk mengucapkan terima kasih kepada teman-teman dosen atas semangat juang yang luar biasa untuk memberikan ilmu terbaik dan terupdate bagi mahasiswa-mahasiswa kita, dan terus berusaha meningkatkan kualitas pembelajaran kita dan meningkatkan kompetensi yang sesuai dengan kebutuhan industri, serta menjadi role model bagi mahasiswa dan juga memberikan budaya ilmiah, nilai-nilai kejuangan, dan kemanusiaan. Kepada teman-teman alumni, kami terima kasih nanti hadirnya Pak Saiful sebagai Ketua IKV. Mari kita tingkatkan kerjasama dan support terbaik untuk alma mater dalam mendukung magang dalam rangka Merdeka Belajar. Kepada teman-teman Tendik, kami ucapkan terima kasih atas dedikasi dan pengabdian untuk kampus tercinta. Kepada teman-teman mahasiswa, tetap semangat untuk menuntut ilmu, tetap mengasah soft skill dan kompetensi, dan jangan mager. Dan semoga kita semua bisa belajar dengan antusias meskipun ada sedikit kendala karena adanya pandemi. Bapak Ibu yang kami hormati, secara umum insya Allah kita akan berusaha untuk meningkatkan rekognisi dari dunia akademik dan dunia global dalam perbaikan signifikan dari internal bisnis proses yang ada di FEB. Secara singkat dapat kita lihat di tayangan yang ada di depan Bapak Ibu semua, ini adalah sejarah kita 61 tahun yang lalu. Kita semua hari ini menyaksikan bahwa seluruh program studi yang ada di FEB terakreditasi A. Teruskan Mas. Sejarah kepemimpinan saya rasa sudah ada 18 dekan yang ada di kita, dimulai dari Dr. Andes Cho Sien Kong tahun 1958 dan seterusnya hingga sekarang ini oleh saya. Ini adalah values kita, mengambil abreviasi dari Undip. SDM kita, saya rasa barusan kita tadi di ruang tunggu, kita mendengarkan ada beberapa yang insya Allah akan apply di tahun ini. Semoga Pak Arjum, Pak Fuad, dan Pak Syakir saya rasa di tahun ini bisa, juga Pak Firmansyah, dan melanjutkan yang sudah proses sebelumnya, ada Ibu Indi Casusti dan juga Pak Ahyar Yuniawan. Kita ada 19, dan Bapak Ibu kami sampaikan FEB di tahun 61 ini, di 61 tahun FEB, peringkat kita di HS World by Subject, kita nomor 4 di Indonesia, dan kita bisa lihat juga tidak menjamin universitas yang sudah tua dan tidak tua bisa terlempar dari sini, oleh karena itu kita butuh kekompakan dan kesulitan luar biasa agar kita tetap mendapat rekognisi yang baik di level nasional dan internasional. Ini adalah yang sering untuk tujuan double degree kita, ada Section University, ada Curtin, dan yang paling baru adalah kita memiliki kerjasama dengan National University of Singapore. Yang kita banggakan karena the one and only di Indonesia, Bloomberg Financial Laboratory. Saya rasa tidak banyak universitas di Indonesia yang memiliki ini, dan ini adalah satu-satunya. Bahkan di dunia saya rasa tidak terlalu banyak yang memiliki ini. Arah kita juga wirausaha, saya rasa mendekatkan mahasiswa dengan talenta bagaimana tetap inovatif dan kreatif dengan situasi yang ada di luar sana. Kepercayaan publik, saya rasa Bapak Ibu hari ini Fakultas Ekonomi dan Bisnis dipercaya selain di FEB juga di IC, juga sebagai Ketua Free Trade Agreement Semarang dan banyak berperan baik di provinsi maupun di Kota Semarang. Kami terima kasih kepada Pak Mas Saiful dan teman-teman dari IKV yang terus support fakultas kita sehingga kita sangat optimis dan yakin bahwa ke depan kita akan bisa melangkah jauh lebih maju lagi, lebih maju lagi, lebih maju lagi karena kita memiliki alumni-alumni yang sangat baik dan sangat berdedikasi tinggi untuk alma maternya. Yang sedang kita lakukan sekarang, Dirjen Pajak adalah alumni kita, Mas Suryo 85, dan kita support semoga target pajak di tahun ini bagus adanya. Bapak Ibu, demikian pidato singkat dari kami karena ini sedang COVID, tidak perlu berpanjang kata. Kami berharap dan kami berdoa semoga fakultas tercinta kita selalu bagus adanya dan bisa memberikan kontribusi terbaik bagi nusa bangsa, agama, dan juga masyarakat kita, bangsa Indonesia. Kiranya Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala merestui kita semua, tetap sehat, tetap produktif di masa pandemi. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the speech by the Dean of Faculty of Economics and Business Universitas Diponegoro. And the next speech will be delivered by the Chairman of IKV to Mr. Saiful Bahri, SAMM. Time is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Yang kami hormati Rektor Universitas Diponegoro, Profesor Yos Jalan Utama, SAMM, beserta para wakil rektor, Ketua Senat FEB, Profesor Dr. Anis Hariri, Dekan Fakultas Ekonomi Undip, Profesor Dr. Haromo, SMSI, beserta para wakil dekan, segenap guru besar di lingkungan FEB Undip, para dosen dan staf tenaga pendidikan, dan juga mahasiswa FEB Undip, distinguished guest, Profesor Dr. Insinyur Timber Hacker from Section University of Applied Science. Yang kami muliakan para hadirin, para undangan sekalian yang tidak dapat kami sebutkan satu persatu. Izinkanlah saya menyampaikan sebuah pantun, ke Semarang membeli tahu petis, jangan lupa membawa cabai. Saya hadir karena dis Natalis di kampusku tercinta FEB. Pertama-tama, marilah kita panjatkan puji syukur kehadirat Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala yang telah memberikan berbagai kenikmatan kepada kita sekalian, sehingga kita dapat menghadiri acara Rapat Senat Terbuka dan Orasi Ilmiah dalam rangka dis Natalis ke-61 Fakultas Ekonomika dan Bisnis Universitas Diponegoro. Pada usia yang ke-61 ini, izinkanlah kami mewakili Ikatan Alumni FEB Undip menyampaikan apresiasi yang setinggi-tingginya kepada segenap pimpinan dan sivitas akademika FEB Undip yang sampai dengan saat ini telah menorehkan prestasi membanggakan. Bahkan di tahun 2021 ini, FEB Undip masuk dalam kategori 4 besar perguruan tinggi untuk jurusan bisnis dan manajemen versi the US World University ranking by subject 2021. Selanjutnya, kami juga menyampaikan apresiasi karena pada tingkat global, FEB Undip juga masuk dalam peringkat 500 sampai dengan 550 kampus untuk tujuan belajar bisnis. Hadirin peserta Rapat Senat Terbuka yang kami muliakan. Tanpa terasa pandemi COVID-19 sudah setahun lamanya mendera Indonesia. Hampir bersamaan dengan acara dis Natalis ke-60 FEB pada tahun 2020 lalu. Tak hanya menciptakan krisis kesehatan masyarakat, pandemi COVID-19 juga secara nyata telah melumpuhkan aktivitas ekonomi secara nasional. Langkah yang dilakukan pemerintah dengan menerapkan pembatasan sosial berskala besar atau PSBB sejak tahun 2020 lalu ternyata berdampak luas dan mengganggu kinerja perekonomian. Ekonomi Indonesia di tahun 2020 menunjukkan angka pertumbuhan yang tidak menggembirakan. Penghasilan masyarakat yang menurun menyebabkan sebagian besar sektor usaha mengurangi aktivitasnya atau bahkan tutup total. Namun yang menjadi pertanyaan adalah, apakah situasi turbulen yang sedang kita hadapi saat ini dalam jangka panjang akan menghentikan berbagai aktivitas masyarakat, khususnya bisnis? Ternyata situasi turbulen saat ini bukanlah merupakan akhir dari segala-galanya. Di saat banyak perusahaan yang akhirnya give up atau menyerah karena tidak sanggup lagi menghadapi perubahan lingkungan yang ada. Namun tidak sedikit perusahaan yang mampu bertahan dan mampu memanfaatkan peluang baru di saat pandemik ini. Mereka yang mampu bertahan dalam situasi krisis ini tentunya bukanlah karena kebetulan, melainkan karena mereka melakukan perubahan yang sangat mendasar, yaitu mindset. Sebagaimana yang dikatakan oleh Peter Drucker, the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not turbulence itself, but to act with yesterday's logic. Artinya, bahaya terbesar pada saat menghadapi situasi turbulen bukanlah turbulen itu sendiri, melainkan karena bertindak dengan menggunakan logika yang lama. Salah satu perubahan yang harus dilakukan oleh sebuah organisasi adalah dengan mereview kembali seberapa sesuai bisnis model yang digunakan, sebagaimana konsep bisnis model yang dicetuskan oleh Osterwelder, di mana pada saat terjadi perubahan pada segmen pasar, maka yang harus dilakukan adalah merubah value proposition. Demikian juga dengan beberapa key activity, key resource, dan lain-lain. Dalam rangka menjaga sustainability, perusahaan harus memiliki dynamic capabilities, yaitu kemampuan dalam menghadapi perubahan lingkungan. Pada akhirnya, sumber daya manusia adalah menjadi kunci utama perubahan. Inovasi tidak akan muncul dari seorang leader yang masih menggunakan yesterday logic. Oleh karena itu, tantangan terbesar saat ini adalah bagaimana agar FEB UNDIP yang memiliki reputasi cukup baik dalam kancah nasional maupun internasional mampu menghasilkan calon-calon pemimpin yang inovatif, memiliki fighting spirit yang tinggi, dan tentunya skill yang mumpuni, agar mampu menghadapi berbagai tantangan. Salah satu CEO General Electric, Jack Welch, mengatakan, "The game is all about the people. If you choose the wrong people, the game is over." Bahwa sebuah permainan adalah tergantung daripada orang-orang yang ada di dalamnya. Jika salah memilih orang, maka permainan usai. Demikianlah yang dapat kami sampaikan melalui sambutan yang singkat ini. Semoga dengan momentum Natalis ke-61 ini, FEB UNDIP mampu menghasilkan lulusan yang sanggup berkompetisi dalam kancah global dan juga dapat menjadi agent of change bagi masyarakat Indonesia yang sedang berjuang menghadapi pandemik ini. Jayalah selalu UNDIP. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
That was speech by the chairman of IKV. Respected audience, this is the high time for us to listen to speech from the Rector of Universitas Diponegoro, who will be represented by Vice Rector of Research and Innovation, to Professor Dr. Ambarianto, MSc. Time is yours.
Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang, salam sejahtera bagi kita sekalian. Firstly, I would like to apologize since Pak Rektor, Prof. Yos, which actually was planned to attend this important event, but since he has another important agenda, he asked me to represent him. Secondly, I would like to congratulate Pak Dekan, Vice Deans, academics, Senate, and all academics and administrative staffs, students, also alumni on the Faculty of Economics and Business on the 61st anniversary of the faculty. With all the achievements so far that has been mentioned by Nadine, the latest was the subject business and management was recognized or included by QS World University Ranking by subject. This is actually quite something because it's never before Undip being recognized based on subject like this. So again, I would like to congratulate the Dean and everyone from Faculty of Economic and Generally, I have noticed that the development, a significant improvement of this faculty, and it seems that you are on the right path, you are on the right track. Many thanks to the Dean and all the committee members for organizing the celebration of the 61st Natalis or anniversary of Faculty of Economics and Business, University of Diponegoro. I know that there are a series of events that have been organized by the faculty, and today we are in the event of Rapat Senat Terbuka dan Orasi Ilmiah with the theme of business models and business model innovation in relation to digitization, sustainability, and COVID-19. We are very honored to have a distinguished keynote speaker in this event, Dr. Timber Hacker, Professor of Business Models of Saxion University of Applied Science of the Netherlands. Your thought would enable us to gain knowledge from your expertise and experience. On behalf of University of Diponegoro, I would like to thank you for your support. On this occasion, I would like to express my gratitude again to the Dean, Vice Dean, lecturer, and staff of the Faculty of Economic and Business who have worked hard in providing the best services in the implementation of Tridharma Perguruan Tinggi in the faculty. I hope that this spirit of togetherness will always be awakened in this faculty. One more, I would like to congratulate on the 61st Natalis of the Faculty of Economic and Business, University of Diponegoro. Hopefully, the Faculty of Economics and Business will progress and develop, and its graduates will have an increasingly role in society, not only in creating jobs, but also creating prosperity for the community, especially for those who are marginalized. Well, let's enjoy the event, and that's all from me. Always keep the spirit up, keep safe and healthy. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, let's get to the main event today, which is scientific oration by Professor Timber Hacker from Saxion University of Applied Sciences, the Netherlands.
We cordially invite Dr. Jaka Aminata, SAMA, to read the brief CV of the keynote speaker. To Dr. Jaka Aminata, SAMA, the time is yours.
Yeah. So good morning, everybody. Let me just get it all started. So I hope you can see my screen, the presentation. So first of all, thank you so much for this invitation to be a keynote speaker at such a great and distinguished event like this event. It is a great honor to speak at this event. So first of all, I would like to congratulate you with the 61st Dies Natalis of the faculty. I think that's really a great achievement. It shows a really long history of great research in this field. And I think we are at quite an important moment in time. Also, if you think about finance, business, and economics, of course, on the one hand, we are in the midst of a great pandemic, we all hope that we will be able to move forward and to return to a state where life for everybody, people, and economy is returning to a more stable state. On the other hand, if you look at the longer term, the way we do business, the way we look at economics, the way we consider finance, I think is also important to see how we have to evolve for the longer term. If you look at the great transitions and challenges the world at a global scale is actually facing. We talk about sustainability, for example. We talk about the climate. We talk about energy. And we are talking about the things that we really have to value, things that are really important to us. And that's also the relationship with my presentation and talk today. It's about business models. And the core of any business model, that's about value. It's about the values that we treasure. It's about the right people, as was mentioned before. I have a special reason why I'm also honored to be here speaking today. I have a background in applied mathematics, Matematika Terapan, I think you would say in Indonesian. As a PhD student and also later working at Delft University of Technology, maybe you have heard of it. I had the pleasure of guiding a number of PhD students coming from Indonesia. And actually I've traveled with them to Indonesia. And one of them was from Semarang. And almost 21 years ago now, I spent some very nice days at Semarang at my friend's place at that time. Enjoyed the hospitality and enjoyed a lot of your country. Made a tour over Java, saw a lot of beautiful things. And I still consider them close friends, and I feel very attached in that sense to your country. So that was, one extra reason for me to be very happy to be here today. In a way, I've come a long way, coming from the field of applied mathematics to more the field of business models. I guess kind of the common denominator there is that both areas are a lot about modeling. You look at reality and you try to get grips on reality, and you try to make a model of reality to be able to, to get a grip on it, to reason about it, to understand it, to analyze it. And in a way, if you think about business models, also a lot about designing it. So let's start with the presentation. As said, it's about business models, but there's also the relation with digitization and with sustainability, as mentioned. And given the current situation we are in, there has to be a relationship, of course, with COVID-19 as well. As mentioned, I'm from the Saxion University of Applied Sciences. We are a partner of your university, and we're very happy to do so. And I think being here today is also a way to express our appreciation of being partners with your university, and as a way also to shape a cooperation. So a little bit about our background. I think one of the speakers before me already mentioned, in the end, it's always about people. And these, in a way, are my people, so to say, from our research group. We are the research group of business models within the Academy of Finance and Accounting. Some already have a PhD, some are still working on their PhD, various backgrounds, some people from more design-oriented areas, other more from economics, most Dutch. This is Thierry, our French guy, and this is Christophe, our German guy. So we have kind of an international group. In our research, we focus on the one hand, let's say, on new business models, actual new business models that look at how to use technology in a smart and sensible way. and to create value that also takes sustainability and social value into account. So on the one hand, we look, of course, with business models at the economic perspective, but more and more also looking at sustainability and social value. So looking at new business models is one part of our research. The other part, which is quite important, and there's a lot of research really linked to that, that's about the development of method and tools that help you to effectively design new business models. So we take quite a bit, let's say, design perspective to business models and business model innovation. And basically, we do that in two labs that we kind of run from a research group. One is called our Business Model Lab, and the other one is more specific. That's a lab on a circular economy. I'll get to that a little bit later. That also has to do with the sustainability view that we have in our group. And kind of the value proposition, let's say, of our labs is that the Business Model Lab helps companies to remain future-proof. And our field lab on circular economy helps them to become more circular. That's kind of the idea behind it. And if you think about, let's say, the business model of our research group, you can talk about business models for any organization or part of an organization. And you could say this is kind of our value proposition, the value that we want to create. Should show it like this. And if you look at our customers, for example, then on the one hand, we of course have students that we see as customers. On the other hand, we see companies as our customers as we try to help them. And we see science as our customer when we want to contribute new knowledge and new tools to science. And if you look at our important resources, then the people, of course, are the most important resources. And you can say we have a portfolio of projects in which we do our research. That's also a part of the resources that we have. Now, of course, part of a business model is also our how do you make money, let's say? How do you sustain your cost? And we have partial financing from the university, which is kind of a basis financing. On top, we acquire subsidies for doing research, and sometimes we do work for companies, which is a bit more close to consultancy in a way. So those are the three ways we kind of make money to sustain the group. So that's kind of the business model of our research group. Now, I said a little bit already on that. So what is actually a business model? And I realized that given the distinguished group of people that I'm now talking to, there may be parts of this talk that you are already familiar with. You may already have a lot of experience with business models. Then to some extent, this may be kind of a repetition, but I've also tried to make it not too technical, let's say, but to really link to digitization and sustainability, those kinds of aspects. But still, I guess it's good to look a little bit at how we see a business model. You could say that a lot of technology or a lot of new products and services are driven by technology. We have technology developments, new ideas come out, but good technology alone is not enough to actually create value for people and companies. You need a viable business model. And the business model then we see is a way of describing how you create and capture value. So how do you create value for your customers, and how do you capture value for yourself, for your company, let's say, and for society at last, and maybe for your stakeholders. So this is the basic idea of a business model. It's about creating and capturing value. So value, we look from a broad perspective. It's not only about profit. It is also about people and planet. So people, profit, planet. The 3 Ps, as it's sometimes called. Unit of analysis. Often people only look at the firm, but you can also look at the product of service that's being developed, and look at all the firms that are needed to provide that service to the people. And we often look in a situation where one party cannot do everything by themselves, but they have to collaborate. So we take a multi-actor approach. So we look at network business models. Now, why is it useful to think about a business model and do a systematic analysis of your business model? One reason is that it's a good way to rethink your business logic. I'll get to that a little bit later as well, but what you see a lot currently is that companies are not selling their products in one transaction, but they are offering that product as a service. For example, in the Netherlands, bicycles. We have more bicycles in the Netherlands than people. It's a bicycle country. And every student has a bicycle. In the old days, you would buy an old bike and use that. But these days, bikes are offered as a service. So it's like a lease construction. You pay a certain amount a month, and you lease it from a company, and then that company takes care of the bicycle. So it's from a product, you go to a service model. So that really is a change, you could say, in your business logic. You don't make money by selling bikes, you make money by leasing the bikes. So, and business model is a good thing to rethink that business logic. Well, it's good for structuring complexity. Also important is that it fosters communication and co-creation. If you make very clear what your business model is, then it's easy to talk about. A business model also is a kind of a language that helps you discuss with others. And I think also quite important is a business model helps you to stimulate experimentation, to stimulate innovation. If you have a good description for business model, you can think about what kind of changes can I make to make it better or to improve it. So we'll try not to use too many texts, a bit more pictures. So if you think about value, that can take a lot of different forms. If you think about navigation in a car, that's a very functional form of value. You want to go from A to B in the quickest way. The service, the product helps you to accomplish that task. So that's about getting a job done. This is a picture from, I think it's Disneyland somewhere. Of course, there's a value also that's provided, but that's more a value about being entertained. It's not so much functional, it's more an emotional value. So value can take many different forms in a business model, and it depends on the customer for whom you develop or design your value, what actually is of value. Now, also, there's a great link between context and value. What is a value to one person may not be a value to another one, and it also may depend on the situation. And this small animation tries to capture that, where you see this gray thing moving from left to right, and depending on the background, the context, it seems to change color. So what you view and what your perception of value depends on your personal preferences, and depends on your context. If you are very thirsty, a bottle of water has more value than maybe when you're not thirsty. So that's quite an important thing. Oh, sorry. I think I had a problem with the presentation. Let me just restart it. I think this was a little bit too much context, maybe. It's opening again.
Yes. Hello, Professor Timber.
So.
Hello, Professor. Good morning.
Good morning.
Sorry, because I have a problem with the IT, but okay now. And for your speech, sorry, there is no discussion. So, question, please, after you give a speech.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Professor Timber?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry, because I have.
think it's working again. Okay.
30 minutes, and there is no question and answer.
Okay. Okay, shall I continue?
Yes, please.
Okay. Sorry about that. That sometimes happens when you're trying to animate something in a presentation, then the system collapsed. That's what just happened now. And so I hope it is physical again.
Share screen, I think. Please wait.
Can you see it?
Please wait.
Okay, thank you. So let me just continue.
Professor Timber, yes, I got your file. So in which page, please?
Okay, that's also fine. Yes, this one. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, well, okay, but just I can do it like this. Yeah, I have my my PowerPoint running again, so I could share it also. Again, it's just the it was just the animation, but it's okay now again. So I suppose I can. Shall I share my screen again? That's a bit easier to click through. Yeah.
Okay.
But let me just try. I think it's okay. So I think it's okay again. Yeah. It's okay. Sorry for the disturbance. If you think about the a business model, especially how to describe a business model, discussed already a little bit. In essence, it's about asking 4 questions if you want to describe a business model. And finding the right answers to those 4 questions, that is how you can describe your business model. So that sounds really easy, but in practice it's pretty hard because there are so many things to consider at the same time, and there are so many options to choose from. I think the key in a business model is about the value proposition. What do you want to offer to your customer and to who? So this is the customer, this is what you want to offer. And the second question is about how do you create that value for your customer? So that's, let's say, the value chain, maybe a little bit old-fashioned term, you maybe now call it the value network. So this is really about who have to be your partners, what are the resources that you need to create that value. And the final part is about the revenue model. So how do you create revenue or value for yourself? So if you want to create a business model, that's about answering these 4 questions, basically. So that sounds simple. In practice, it's really hard because you have to really balance your the choices that you make here. Now, this is actually a model from Swiss researchers called Business Model Navigator from Gassman et al. And what is interesting to realize is that actually there are dozens of ways to describe a business model. And it depends a little bit what you want to do exactly, which model which framework is the best at some point. Some models are more focused on individual firm. Others will stress more the network that you work in. Some take more digitization into account. Others are more suited if you really want to look at the sustainable aspects of your business model. So we will not cover that all. I just want to show one because I guess the one that I will show is the most used in the world at the moment. It's called the business model canvas. You may have heard about it. And in a way, it kind of takes those 4 questions that I just mentioned, but adds a few more components, or let's say it develops it further into more components. For example, if you had a question about who, it talks about, okay, who is your customer? What are the channels that you communicate with your customer with? And what kind of relationship do you have with your customer? This can be a very personal relation, but more and more, if you talk about digital services, this can be a completely automated relation as well. So this is about the who, or some people would say the value delivery part of the model. In the core, let's say, in the core also of the business model canvas, those 9 boxes, it's about what is the value proposition. Now, how do you create your business model? It will talk about what are the key activities that you do, what are the resources that you need, that's here, and who are your key partners. So how do you collaborate to create the value? So how to do the value creation. And then here at the bottom line, you would talk about the revenue structure and about the cost structure. So these 3 boxes here, 1 here in the middle, 3 over here, and 1 here. These 9 boxes together constitute the business model canvas. I guess the most used in the world to describe a business model. The strength, I guess, is that it's one picture which can completely show your business model. Maybe that's also the weakness, as sometimes you can write your business model like this and you think, okay, what can I do next? What does it actually mean? Sometimes it lacks, let's say, the depth of the description. Yeah, well, some people speak of the magic triangle here, where you really say, okay, who's your customer? What are you offering? How are you going to make your money from that? See that as the core of the business model. Well, as you also may know, when you talk about the revenue model, some people consider the business model the same as the revenue model. We would like to see the revenue model being a part of the actual business model. So the revenue model is the part that describes how you make money. Now, okay, I think already in the previous talks, COVID-19 was mentioned, the pandemic. As in Indonesia, as in the Netherlands, everywhere in the world, companies have been looking at how to adapt to the pandemic. A lot of things have changed. We have different rules in each country. The rules often are about mouth mask, they are about keeping distance, they are about lockdowns. So a lot of the practices that people use in doing business are not possible anymore. So people are looking for innovating their business in all kinds of ways. And if you look at how people are trying to do that, and you look at the components of the business model, then some of them are trying to change their offering. If you have a gym where you can do exercise, they've moved to digital lessons. You can stay at home and do your exercise. So that's a change in the offering, let's say, they have. If you think about certain farmers, they used to deliver especially to restaurants, but during the lockdown, maybe the restaurants are closed. So you have lost your customers. So what can you do? So rather than sell to the restaurant, you see that a lot of farmers are now directly selling to customers. So not to restaurants anymore, but to customers. And they sometimes create something called a drive-through. So you go to a space where you can sell your stuff to people just passing by, where you can keep a distance. So basically, you have changed the channel and the target group in your business model. And that is how you can innovate your business. Now, what you've seen, especially in Europe and I think in other parts of the world, that in the beginning of the pandemic, there was a huge shortage of face masks. So you would see a lot of manufacturers move transition from, for example, producing mattresses, what they did before, to producing face masks. So they would use their assets in a different way. That's another form of business model innovation. And sometimes you would see, if you are a service company, maybe you sell holidays. People cannot travel anymore, so what can you do? Well, what some of them did is sell vouchers. So people would pay now, but would get their services later. In that way, you would still have some money coming in, and ensuring that at least you have some revenues. Wow. So you see all kinds of companies and organizations change their business model and their practices. If I look at our own university, and I guess it's no different at your university, we have largely moved from, let's say, physical lessons on the campus to mostly online lessons. That's really a large change. And it will be interesting to see how much of that change will remain when, hopefully at some point, the pandemic is behind us. I would expect in education, for example, that we will see much more a hybrid form of education where the amount of digital lessons has increased compared to, let's say, the situation before the pandemic. So that's quite an interesting thing. I have a few insights from a research we did, an international survey about changes in business models and business operations by companies in a number of countries. So we looked at the COVID-19 impact on business models and practices. And we looked mainly in four countries. We looked at the Netherlands, and we looked at work with a partner in Vietnam, a partner in India, and a partner in Romania, to see how especially companies responded to the pandemic. And I will not show everything, but anyway, clearly there's an urgency. This is already from some time ago again, but it really shows, what a pandemic actually is and how it hits everywhere in the world. And sort of the research question behind that research is that there's kind of a lack of knowledge about how you can strengthen a business model in a global disruptive context. In this case, we have the pandemic. There could be other global disruptive context. If you think about the climate change, for example, maybe it is not happening so fast as our current pandemic. It's much more slower development, but still it's coming towards it. So it's interesting to see how you can actually make your business model stronger and adapt to the new situation, and maybe use digital for that, and at the same time look at the social aspects. So this is a little bit about the setup of the survey. That we looked at these four main countries. The most respondents came from the Netherlands, then from Romania, Vietnam, and India. And there were actually 22 other countries also involved in the survey. So it was quite a mixture, let's say. And if you look at the type of organizations that we interviewed, that most of them were for-profit, some for non-profit. If you looked at the respondent, what is their role? Most of them were employees, some manager, entrepreneurs, others. And then you look at the organization size in the sample, and then we see it's quite mixed from really small companies, less than 10 employees, to a lot of large companies as well, bigger than 250 employees. One of the, I think, interesting results that came out of this research, that it did not matter so much whether you were a big company or a small company, whether you were an employee or a manager. The responses from most people were quite similar. The way they perceived the pandemic were quite comparable. And even between countries, the differences were somewhat similar, although also were some interesting differences. We looked at a number of aspects about business models, and one of them was about digitization, which kind of makes sense, of course. The way we are meeting now, of course, is a digital solution, where in another situation, maybe you would have your Dies Natalis with a much larger group of people together. So digital is really having a big impact currently. And we asked people whether they were using more digital methods now than before the crisis. And if you look at where they actually apply more digital, then for example, in the offer to clients, so product or service not offered more in a physical sense, but really in a digital way, then you see that more than 50% of all respondents would say, yes, in our company, we now apply more digital methods in our offering. And there are some changes. In the Netherlands, it is like 70%. Romania was a little bit less. And we did some additional studies, and they would see that the infrastructure in the Netherlands is a little bit ahead of that in Romania. So it was a bit easier to change to, let's say, digital offering than in other countries. So that's probably why it's higher here. As you see it in the offer to the clients, also the contact with clients, you see it increasing a lot, and also within the organization. If you have a lot of employees from a company, before they would go to the office and meet physically, and now they are in Zoom, in Teams and stuff like that. But also, for example, field workers are now more working from home and use digital channels to communicate with their customers, for example. They do maintenance maybe from a distance, things like that. So there's a huge growth in the use of digital. And you can, that in the survey, of course, we asked people these questions. They could say yes, no, but we would also ask about, okay, what kind of changes would you see? How these things change? You can see a large acceleration, let's say, of the adoption and acceptation of digital, where previously people said, well, if I want to talk to a customer, I step in my car and drive to that customer to talk to the customer. And that's the only way that it's possible. And now people have realized, well, even for a customer meeting, you can actually use a digital channel. And it's not so much worse than an actual physical meeting. So the acceptation of digital has grown quite a lot. There are a lot of employers that say, well, I don't want that my employees work from home, because then I don't have control. And now they are forced to let their employees work at home. And now they realize, okay, sometimes employees are more productive working from home. So there's a clear change in the mindset of people, what the added value of digital can be. There's a lot more adoption and acceptance that there is this added value. And we find that in all the countries surveyed. Well, there's a lot more to say about that, but I would like to add this one, and that's about social value. So one of our, or a few of our questions talked about social value, because we think it's an important aspect of the business model. And it's also something that's discussed a lot, I think, if you talk about the pandemic, where people say, in creating value, it's also important about what does a service or your business model mean for the community. Are we providing value to, for example, also to our employees, the people that work for us? Are we only about making money, or are we also interested in, let's say, the well-being of the people around our factory, for example? So we're asking also about social value, and whether companies are now more aware that in providing a service or a product, and in developing and in providing a service, often there is also this social aspect. Are they now more aware of this social value relative to economical value? And In fact, we found that more than half of all people said, yes, we are now more aware of the social aspects. You know, before, let's say, social contact, before the pandemic, we were, you know, that was the normal state of being. It was not perceived as very special, personal contact, for example. Now we have realized that personal contact is not so easy anymore, and that is kind of special. So the idea of social value has grown, has gained more awareness, and people also expect that this will continue after the pandemic. You know, and I think it's interesting because there's a lot of talk about building back better. For example, when we move beyond the pandemic, we should not just return to the way things were. We should try to improve. And we should improve also in terms of social value and ecological value. Some people would say, don't waste a good crisis. Don't try to return to what you once were. Try to become better than you were. So that's a kind of an interesting thing. There was, for example, one guy that said, one responded, if you own a restaurant, then it's certainly not about providing, but it's also about providing a context where social value is created. People are meeting, people talk to each other. So these kind of things are becoming more important. Well, if you like, I can, of course, share the paper. There are a few other interesting things there. I'm moving to the next slide. I'm taking a little bit of a risk here. Of course, there's a small animation in there. And I have the feeling that my PowerPoint today is not the most stable. So we have to see if it works or if we have a hiccup again. It's the last animation, so if it goes wrong here, it will know we won't have trouble later on anymore. It's about the idea that developing a business model is very much about a balancing act. You know, you have to create value for your customers, you have to create value for yourself, for your partners. If you work with partners, then all these partners have different interests, so you have to balance those interests. Customers have requirements, so it's really, you need to balance interest and requirements, let's say. So I think I'll just quickly move on before it breaks down. Anyway, so it's a lot about balancing, but because there are so many choices to make, and to get it right, you need to make the right choices and the right create the right balance. So moving over a bit more to the digital world and the impact on business models. This is quite a full picture that captures not everything, but at least it captures a lot of aspects I think that are relevant in let's say the digital transformation that we are in now. And you could kind of say that you know, the digital transformation, of course, information and data is kind of the key of the whole transformation. And information and data relate to things. If you think about the Internet of Things, for example, we can now put sensors on things, and we can measure a lot of things, and we can kind of talk to these things. If you think about a smart home, for example, we maybe we can with voice recognition kind of manage our home. Just for example, we can manage the heating or the lights, and in a smart home, let's say, sensors measure maybe temperature or the moist in there, or whether it's dark or not, and it will adapt, switch on lights and manage the temperature, for example. And autonomous cars, I think, also interesting here. Things that get connected to the internet, so they can pick up information and they can measure things, and in this combination they can kind of manage them themselves. There's a lot about people also. If you think about digital, There's something called the quantified self, where people measure a lot about their body, for example, heart rate or blood pressure, these kind of things. And depending on maybe if you have a special condition, they could measure other aspects in your blood, for example. So measuring lots of things about yourselves can help you to maybe improve your performance or help you to maintain a healthy status. So there's a lot of measuring here also. Personal data stores, yeah, that's, I think, is something that's still coming up. We know there is a lot of information going around. If you are on Facebook or you are on WhatsApp or if you use Google, all these big companies that you share information with to be able to use their services. Of course, this information they use to sell to other companies. That's how these parties operate. Now, in a personal data store, the idea would be that you still are the boss of your own data. All your personal data is stored in here, and you decide with whom you want to share that data. That's the idea of a personal data store. Where currently, you know, if you use services, for example, of the big tech parties, these large platforms, often you don't know what happens with your data. It could be used anywhere. Now, of course, there's a link with business, of course. Everything as a platform is an interesting development. More and more businesses are moving to become a platform. Also think of the Ubers, Airbnb of this world. But also think about development like blockchain, a distributed ledger, which allows basically businesses and people to create transactions together without there's a trusted third party in the middle. Well, there are a few other things to mention here. The sharing economy, I think, is interesting, which is also enabled a lot by digital. I think Airbnb started like that. If you have accommodation available, you can rent it out to somebody else, for example, and the platform is kind of mediating that. So there's a lot of digital developments, and they really impact, let's say, businesses, propositions, how business is done, the costs of the business efficiency, and it enables new kind of businesses. Not possible before, and certainly not on the scale as we know it now. And well, you can see here a little bit in this picture where the impact of digital already has been and is still happening. I think already in the 90s, yeah, in music and photography, for example, that's where digital already hit. When I was young, I used to have records or cassettes for music. And if I show that to my children, they look at me and they don't understand what these things are anymore, because they are used to streaming services. They are on Spotify, for example. So that has completely changed. Photography, you know, in the old days, you would have Kodak, the film, actual film. You would have a photo device. You would make pictures, then you would have to bring it to a shop to develop the pictures, and it would take a lot of time. And now I mean, I checked my mobile phone, I think yesterday, for photos. Thousands of photos are just stored on here. So that's incredible. And a little bit later, for example, travel changed in Europe. I guess it's the same with you. Not even that long ago, you would go to a travel agency to arrange your travels. And these days you are behind the computer and you do it yourself. Interesting also, I think, in between these times, that travel in a way has also become much more peer-to-peer. If you want to learn about a place, of course you can read a travel book, but more and more people would go to social media and learn from peers. Okay, you have been to that place, tell me what was it like, these kind of things. And there are much more areas where digitalization is now really hitting education, especially in this time. I think in banking it has gone really far. if you look at the number of people also employed by banks, that's has been going down for years and years. To a large part, it has to do with digitization. You don't need bank offices more. People don't go there. They do their banking business with an app or, on their computer, for example. I think automotive is you know, of course, we think often about self-driving cars, but if you look at the Tesla, in a way it's similar to an iPhone in the sense that it can be updated, how it's operating, for example. So that's happening there more and more. And looking to 2025 and beyond, it's clear that almost any company, any industry you can think of will be hit by digitization. One of the areas that gets, you know, is under important changes, undergoing important change, I think, is also the building industry. You see in many places building information modeling, for example. So it's more and more shifting from, let's say, the traditional approach to much more digital supported building, let's say. And one step further, I think, will also be that you could build on an industrial scale. So you would build houses or parts of houses in a factory, and you would bring them to the building place and there assemble it. And the designs for these components, they will be digital. Another aspect, I think, of housing here is that also in relation with these things, more and more you will see sensors being placed in buildings to measure all kinds of things as a way to also manage a building and keep it of good quality for a longer time. You can do maintenance, for example, if you measure a lot, not only in buildings, that can also be in manufacturing, of course. If you measure a lot, you can use that information to much better do maintenance of materials and buildings. And I think the industries mentioned here is not, you know, like music, it's not one wave, let's say, but new waves will come and will keep transforming these areas. So this is really an interesting area. And another interesting aspect here also is the relationship between, let's say, digital and sustainability. Okay, here are some typical business model in the digital arena. Some of you may know, you have of course, the on-demand type of business model with the Uber, let's call it taxi services, and there's a lot of subscription-based like the Netflix and others for streaming. And well, to mention a few more. Some people call this hidden revenue generation. Google and Facebook, they provide free services for us. But of course, we, the users, are kind of the product that they sell to companies. They collect our data and sell that to advertisers. That's how they make money. So it's kind of hidden. We kind of pay with data and with our attention to the services. Another interesting model, I think you see a lot with digital, is the freemium model. So it's a combination of free and premium. For example, Spotify, you can have a free version, but if you upgrade to a paid subscription, you get more features. So it's free, and there's the premium one. And that is really something that really fits with digital, because the marginal cost of one extra customer are extremely low. Once you have the platform working, it's the cost for adding additional customers is almost zero. So you can actually allow to have a lot of free customers, and only a few customers actually pay for the service to still have a viable business model. Well, there are a few more. We cannot look at all of them. Another trend I think that's interesting, data-driven business models. This is about an example of a community. This is, I think, somewhere in the United States called Patients Like Me. So this is really a community for people that suffer from a certain illness or a condition, and they can talk to each other about that condition and share practices, for example, share information about medicine, about how to deal with their illness, for example. The thing is that this community, because it has so many members, it generates a lot of data, and this data is valuable, and they sell this data to pharmaceutical companies, for example, that can help them to produce better medicine, for example. And if you look at the business model, then this is kind of the business model. Here are the users that are sharing information about their illness that leads to data for the platform. That data is then sold to the pharmaceutical industry. Pharmaceuticals pay for that. And in the end, that means that the platform is free for the users because the money comes in from the pharmaceutical industry. Now, this is kind of an interesting model because many people will say, well, if I have a certain disease, do I want to share data, that information with a platform? The interesting thing in this example is that they are very transparent about how they collect the data, how they anonymize it, how they aggregate it, and then how they share it with, for example, the pharmaceutical industry. So it's a very transparent model, and many people say, okay, I have to give up some of my data, but in exchange, there's a free platform, and with that data, maybe pharmaceutical industry can create better medicine for me. So, that's kind of a trade-off that they accept. And of course, here it's very transparent what happens with your data. But if you use Facebook or you use Google, you are sharing a lot of data. If you walk around with your mobile phone, there's a lot of data tracked. Often you don't know that. And that's being used by tech companies. And at least here, it's very transparent what happens. So that's a bit about data-driven business models. Mentioned already platforms. Platform, or often called a multi-sided business model. Platform brings together different types of users. If you think about, it's like a marketplace, basically. You have buyers and sellers. If you think about Uber, you have people, you have drivers that provide rides, and on the other side, you have passengers that are looking for a ride. And so that's a two-sided platform, two-sided business model, and sometimes you can have even more parties involved. For example, an advertiser could be involved as well. Now, if you look at some of the value aspects here, PlayStation, that's also kind of a platform, because on the one hand, you have gamers, and on the other hand, you have developers. And here you get kind of a network effect where you say, okay, if there are many gamers, that means it's interesting for developers to develop games. Of course, they want a lot of customers. And on the other hand, if there are a lot of developers, that means a lot of games, then it is an interesting platform for gamers. So size on both sides means more value for the other side as well. So that's called a positive network effect. The more developers, the more interesting for the gamers. The more gamers, the more interesting for the developers. So that's also a reason why a lot of these platforms try to become really big, because the bigger they are, the more value they can actually create. So this is what you would call a matching business model. Now, if you look at another platform, for example, Google, if you think about search, of course, Google does a lot, but if you think about search, then on the one hand, you have people that search for information. And on the other hand, we have advertisers that would like to provide their advertising to people searching. So if I would be searching for new socks, then a company that sells socks would like to show me their ad for the socks that they sell. Now, the thing is that if I look at Google, for example, for socks, then if there are a lot of advertisers, on the first page, I only get advertising, and I never know if that's a good answer to my question or if it's just advertising. I could say that if there are a lot of advertising, that is a negative effect for me as a searcher. And so that's a negative network effect. More advertisers means more biased search results. So there's a negative effect. On the other side, the more people, let's say, looking for those socks, the more interesting for the seller of the socks. There's a positive network effect. So this type of model is called an audience builder. And Google, let's say, has to, how to say that, to entice us to use their system. And they do that by making it very good and making it free. And they earn the money from the right-hand side. Whereas with the PlayStation model, they could earn money from both sides, actually, because it's a positive network effect on both sides. So these network effects are interesting in platforms, and sometimes one side of the platform has to subsidize the other part of the platform to sort of compensate for the negative value that's being created. Now, another interesting aspect, I would say, of business models and current developments is the thinking in terms of ecosystems. Of course, this is something we know from nature. Plants and animals and the natural environment somehow working together to create an ecosystem, and each animal, each plant has a certain role in the whole system. And if you take out one of them, then if you're unlucky, the whole system can kind of collapse. There's a lot of mutual dependence, and they kind of thrive and die together. That's a little bit the idea of an ecosystem. And somewhere in the 90s, people realized, well, in a way, in a business setting, you can also talk about ecosystems, and then it's called the business ecosystem. And there, let's say, the organisms living in there are not plants and animals, but they are enterprises. It could be your company, maybe with your direct suppliers is part of that ecosystem. But if you look a little bit further, you would maybe also look at the supplier of your suppliers. You would go back further in the value in the supply chain, for example. And maybe you have to deal with a supply of complementary products. Let's say, if you sell coffee, then that coffee cannot be made with coffee without coffee machines. So they are kind of complementary. So you have to deal with that. And if you take it even a little bit further, then you could say, okay, you have maybe to deal with government. Maybe not directly involved in the transaction of your business, but they kind of set the context, the rules for doing your business. So they are also part of the ecosystem in that sense. And digitization has kind of grown these business ecosystems because it's now much easier than it used to be to connect to a party via digital channels. It's much easier to make use of digital solutions. You don't have to owe them, you can just use those services. If you start a shop and you need the payment services, you don't have to set up that yourself, you can just buy it. So these ecosystems are important for new value creation, and they tend to be cross-industry. Companies depend on each other, like the games and the consoles, the PlayStation. And often there's a mix of competition and cooperation, co-opetition sometimes called, where sometimes you realize another party is a competitor, but sometimes you have to cooperate, maybe to grow the market together or grow the ecosystem together. So that's an interesting development, and a lot of research is done into how these business ecosystems and the business models within them, how they can be developed and how they evolve. Okay, to speed up a little bit, I would like to add a bit also on, let's say, business models and sustainability, and especially on circular economy, because that's really a hot topic in our research group. Well, if you think about sustainability, this lady, I think she was the former Norwegian Prime Minister, Maud Brundtland, and already in '87 there was a very authoritative, let's say, report from the Brundtland Committee from the United Nations, where she kind of created this definition of sustainability. It's a very general one, but I think it's still very valid. So sustainability is about development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And so we kind of have to stay within the limits of what the Earth can provide us to meet our current needs, to avoid, let's say, wasting the planet and wasting it for a future generation. You may have come across these, the Sustainable Development Goals, 17 of them. So these are a number of goals set by the United Nations where, as a planet, we would and could be working for together to improve on these. And some of them have to do with social values. And that's about poverty, for example, and quality education, kind of thing. Some of them have more to do with ecological value, for example. It's about climate, it's about life in a sustainable way. And some of them still kind of have to do with the economical. So decent work and economic growth for all. So somehow you see more and more that companies are trying to, let's say, include these development goals within their business models. You see often on their websites, for example, they say, okay, we are trying to contribute to goal number 6, for example, clean water and sanitation, or to other ones. For example, our university has subscribed to these goals, and we're now looking how to actually implement them within the university. What does that mean, for example? Until quite recently, if I would get a cup of coffee at Saxion, I would have a cup. I would only use it once, and then it would be thrown away. So it would create a lot of waste. Now we're looking at a very simple example. We improve on these kind of things. So you see more and more that companies are trying to incorporate these goals, trying to make it very practical, and also to be very clear about to stakeholders that they are working on these aspects. If you think about sustainability, how organizations are affected, I think regulations are becoming more and more important on this in this area. So certain practices that produce a lot of waste, for example, or let's say, or are socially not accepted anymore. You have to adapt. In terms of relation with your community, let's say, if you talk about customers or investors, they expect you to somehow contribute to sustainability. Also interesting that we talk to a lot of companies and ask them about a certain practice and say, okay, you seem to be focusing on sustainability. They said, yeah, well, that was a little bit by chance because by reusing secondhand material, we could do our processes cheaper, for example. So they would contribute to ecological value, to sustainability, but the main driver was about cost. Risk management, a lot of high-tech materials or devices, like the mobile phone, for example, they contain a lot of scarce materials, certain metals, where we know that the amount of those metals available are really limited. So we really have to think about how to use those materials and how to safeguard that we still have access to these materials in the future. So it's really about business continuity also. It's not just about being good to the planet, which is of course a perfect motivation, but it's also about business continuity, that companies now are looking more and more to sustainability and are more aware of it. And as I said, investors are demanding more and more now that companies are also accountable about, let's say, the sustainable practices. So ideally, a business model for sustainability is kind of in the center of contributing to, let's say, economic sustainability. So this is still about profit, let's say, about social sustainability. So this is about people, and the environmental sustainability, that's about planet. So here you can kind of see it's about people, planet, profit. And you want to look at a business model that's somewhere here in the middle. So it looks at all these aspects. what are the things to look at then in practical? Of course, it's about environmental and social value, but it's also about looking and thinking about stakeholders outside the core of your ecosystem. So not just looking at your shareholders, for example. I mean, this has for a long time, and to a certain extent still is, the core of the capital system, where you focus on shareholder value, but you want to move from shareholder value to stakeholder value. It's not just about the people owning your stock. It's also about the community at large. And this is also an interesting one. We talk about value, of course, and value has kind of a positive connotation. You want to create value. But sometimes you can create also negative value. If you pollute, for example, a lot, it's a kind of negative value, and you want to reduce negative value, let's say. And I think also quite important, and this is something we try to address more and more also at our university to our students, that sustainability also requires a new type of leadership, let's say, sustainable leadership. You have to take it into account when making strategic decisions, for example. This is something that we try to teach also our students, how to become also sustainable, sustainability leaders. And well, one aspect of sustainability, that's really the circular economy. And the idea of a circular economy is that materials stay in the system. They are being used over and over again. And the circular economy is kind of a new economy, different from what we are used at the linear economy. I mentioned the example of this coffee cup at Saxion. You have raw materials, the cup is produced, I use it one time, and then I threw it away. And in fact, the cup was made of paper, and it had a special coating inside, and that meant it could actually not even be recycled. So it was really linear economy. You produce it, use it, and you throw it away. That's linear economy. Now, what you want to go to a circular economy where materials are not thrown away, but they are reused. Products are, you try to keep products at a high value level as long as possible. I keep showing my mobile phone, that's a good example. People talk about refurbished, for example. An iPhone of 5 years old, many people would think, oh, that's an old iPhone, but in practice, it's still a very good device. And you can refurbish it, and it can go on for another 5 years. So that's how you can keep something into the system. If you think about paper, for example, you can reuse paper many times. So after using it, you can collect paper and then reuse it again. So this is really the circular economy. So it's an economic system of closed loops where materials, component products lose their value as little as possible. You try to keep them of value as long as possible. And from a business continuity point of view, sustainability point of view, that's really of key importance, because we know that for many materials, at the moment, for example, copper is very expensive because it's scarce. We know that many materials at some point, we cannot mine it anymore because there's nothing there anymore. So at some point, we really have to move to this circular economy where we reuse materials. And I guess in many places in the world, there are a lot of...
Hello, Professor Timber, I'm sorry.
Yeah, yes.
5 minutes maximum, please, because...
Yeah, sure. I'll move on. Thank you. Yeah. So I'll just skip this one. Well, okay, this is what happens kind of, and you find this at many places in the world where if dumping is cheaper than sorting and recycling, then this is what you get. And if you think about how things are constructed, often they are constructed to, from a designer point of view, they look really nice. But if you want to reuse this kind of construction, it's almost impossible because these are different materials. They are glued together, so you're not able to reuse it again. Just this last one about sustainability. And I think this is quite an interesting one. This is something that's called Earth Overshoot Day. You can somehow calculate let's say, the capacity of the Earth of providing resources to sustain our lives. And for example, in 2018, already on August 1, we as humanity used up all the resources that the Earth can supply in a sustainable way. So we use more of the Earth than it can actually supply. And if you look at different countries, for example, then US is in the top, in the sense that if everybody on this world would live like an American, we would actually need 5 Earths to sustain that. Well, we have only one, so it's clear that that is not a sustainable option. So let me skip this one as well. One final topic. I think in the beginning I told you that in our research group we look at business models and we look at tools that can help you design and evaluate business models. And actually we have a online environment of our business model lab. And this is actually the link to that, and that provides a lot of tools. And let's say, should I still do this one? Yeah, almost last one. One of the tools that's called business model patterns. If you look at these 3 products here, these are razor blades from Gillette. These are a coffee machine. This is a printer. Then if you look at this from a distance, they have the same or similar business model, because the printer, the machine, is very cheap when you buy it, and the ink is very expensive. This coffee machine is very cheap, but the coffee capsules that go in here is very expensive. And this holder for the razor is very cheap, but the blades are expensive. So people call this the razor and blade model. And in all 3 different areas, very different industries, you see the same model. The machine is cheap, and what goes in there, coffee or ink, is expensive. That's why you make the money with. So this is an example of a pattern. And one of our tools is a collection of these patterns. And we made a game out of it, a card game. So we have collected 52 of these patterns. And these patterns can inspire you when you want to innovate your business model. Because so many companies have used this business model, you can think, okay, maybe this is something that I can use also in my company, for example. So this is one of our favorite tools, let's say, that we use a lot with students also. And as a way also to, I think, contribute to our collaboration between UNDIP and Saxion. I would like to invite you to make use also of our tools, make use of our business model lab tools. So I've actually created a link to our business model lab for the staff and students of UNDIP. So if you're interested, please go there and feel very welcome to use the tools that we have available there. Just by just going to this URL, you will go there, and from there you can find the business model tools that are of use to you. So please be very welcome to use them. So this is the end of my presentation. Thanks for your listening, for your patience. And once again, congratulations with your Dies Natalis. And it was an honor to be with you today.
Thank you very much, Professor Timber Hacker. Okay. Professor Timber Hacker got a PhD in applied mathematics. Thank you very much for your applause, Timber Hacker. And thank you very much.
The scientific oration delivered by Professor Timber Hacker. Thank you very much, Professor, for the meaningful lecture. It will be very beneficial for us. To all audience, please turn your camera on so our operator can capture all of us. Please wait for the audience to be ready. Let me count. 1, 2, 3, Put the smile on. All right, for the second capture, once more. 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much.
I will speak in bahasa. Hadirin yang kami muliakan, acara selanjutnya adalah penyerahan cindera mata kepada staf pengajar dan tenaga kependidikan yang purna tugas setelah menyelesaikan masa bakti di Fakultas Ekonomika dan Bisnis Universitas Diponegoro.
Adapun akan kami bacakan daftar yang purna tugas bagi berikut. Yang pertama Profesor Dr. Miasto SU, kemudian Dr. Anda Hajah Herniwati Retno Handayani MS, kemudian Dr. Dwi Setio Purwono MSc, kemudian keempat Dr. Mudiantono MSc, kelima Nurholis SH, keenam Taryono, dan ketujuh Suparyono.
Kepada Dekan Fakultas Ekonomika dan Bisnis Universitas Diponegoro dan perwakilan dari tenaga kependidikan yang purna tugas Bapak Suparyono, kami persilahkan untuk menempatkan diri di depan dan dilanjutkan dengan foto bersama. Kami persilahkan untuk kembali ke tempat.
Respected audiences, our next agenda is prayer. Let's take a moment of silence to pray together according to our respective religion and beliefs. To Mr. Marwini SHIMA MSI, time is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Ismahli aqra'u du'a fi hadzal barnamij bil lughatil arabiyyah wa hayya binabtadi bi qiraati ummil Qur'an ma'an ala hadhihi niyya al-Fatihah. A'udzu billahi minasyaitonir rajim. Alhamdulillah. Iyyaka na'budu wa nasta'in. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Hamdash syakirin, hamdan na'imin, hamdan yuwafi ni'amahu wa yukafi'u mazida. Ya Rabbana lakal hamdu kama yanbaghi li jalali wajhika 'azimi sultani. Rabbi zidna ilma warzuqna fahma. Rabbi israh lana sudurana. Allahumma 'allimna ilman yanfa'una wanfa'na bima 'allamtana waj'alna min 'ulama'ikal 'amilin mukhlishina bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Allahumma ighfir lana wa liwalidayna warhamhuma kama rabbayana shaghira. Allahumma sahhil umurana wa umura muallimina wa umura asadatina wa umura tullabna wa umura khususan kulliyatul iktisadi wal mal Universitas Diponegoro. Allahumma inna nas'aluka salamatan fid din wa afiyatan fil jasad wa ziyadatan fil ilmi wa barakatan fir rizqi, wa taubatan qablal maut, wa rahmatan 'indal maut, wa maghfiratan ba'dal maut. Allahumma hawwin 'alaina fi syakaratil maut, wan najata minan nar, wal afwa 'indal hisab. Rabbana zalamna anfusana wa illam taghfir lana wa tarhamna wa lanakunanna minal khasirin. Allahumma inna nas'aluka ridhaka wal jannah. Allahumma inna nas'aluka ridhaka wal jannah wa na'udzu bika min sakhatika wan nar. Rabbana taqabbal minna innaka antas samiul alim wa tub alaina innaka antat tawwabur rahim. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adzaban nar. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Syukran, sumassalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, before the event closed, there will be closing remark by the Senate of Faculty of Economics and Business Universitas Diponegoro.
To Professor Anis Hariri, SA Akuntan MCom PhD, the time is yours.
Baik, terima kasih. Bapak Ibu yang saya hormati, sebelum acara ini resmi kami tutup, izinkan kami untuk menyampaikan ucapan terima kasih yang sebesar-besarnya pada Bapak Dekan dan jajarannya, pada anggota Senat, Ketua IKV, Panitia, dan juga hadirin yang tidak bisa kami sebut satu persatu, atas semua bantuan kerjasama sehingga acara sidang Senat Terbuka hari ini bisa berjalan dengan lancar. And I also would like to thank Professor Timber Hacker for the excellent speech and providing us with some wonderful insight about the business model in the era of pandemic. Dan dengan mengucap syukur alhamdulillah dan dengan seizin Bapak Ibu hadirin sekalian, sidang terbuka Senat Fakultas Ekonomika dan Bisnis Universitas Diponegoro dengan acara orasi ilmiah dalam rangka Natalis ke-61 oleh Profesor Timber Hacker. Dengan ini saya resmi ditutup. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Respected the Chairman and members of the Senate of Faculty of Economics and Business Universitas Diponegoro, the Dean and the Vice Dean, it is the time to leave the room. Thank you very much for your participation.
And respected audience, we've arrived at the end of the event. From the deepest of my heart, I do apologize for my mistakes in presenting this event.
We're truly honored to have you with us in this event, and we hope you have been enjoying yourself at the event so far. Thank you so much for the amazing enthusiasm and participation.
I will speak in bahasa. Kami mohon kepada seluruh peserta untuk mengisi daftar hadir di kolom live chat untuk pembuatan e-sertifikat. Dan setelah itu kami persilakan untuk meninggalkan room. Akhir kata, billahi taufik wa hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.